The first thing I registered was the smell of antiseptic. That and the relentless beeping of a heart monitor. Each sound echoed like a slow countdown, pulling me back from the void. I opened my eyes, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights. The ceiling was sterile, white, too still. My mouth was dry, my head pounding. My limbs felt disconnected, like I was floating just outside my body. "Miss Sinclair?" A voice, calm, male, not familiar. I turned slowly. A doctor, middle-aged, eyes kind but wary. Behind him stood a nurse scribbling something on a clipboard. "You're awake," he said. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. You were in a car accident just outside Lakehurst." Lakehurst? The name rang hollow. My mind scrambled for something, anything. "I don't remember," I whispered. My throat ached with dryness. "That's expected. You've suffered a mild concussion. Some retrograde amnesia is common in cases like yours. But the good news is, you're stable. You'll make a full recovery." Relief flickered briefly, but was quickly eclipsed by something darker. I didn't remember the accident. I didn't remember the drive. I didn't even remember who I had been driving with. Or who I was. I looked down. My hands were scratched, a faint IV in one. I was in a hospital gown, nothing familiar clinging to me. No purse, no phone, no sense of place or time. But then the door opened, and everything shifted. A man stepped in. Tall, dark suit, slate gray coat folded over his arm. Sharp cheekbones, storm-colored eyes, a watch that looked like it cost more than my rent. And that face. I didn't know him, but my body reacted like it did. The doctor glanced at him, then at me. "I'll give you 2 a moment," he said quietly. 2? The man moved closer, his footsteps unhurried, deliberate. He didn't smile, didn't even try. He stopped at the foot of my bed, arms crossed loosely over his chest, gaze fixed on mine like he was scanning for something behind my eyes. "You don't recognize me," he said. It wasn't a question. I shook my head. His jaw tightened, barely, but I saw it. "I'm Nathaniel Blackwood," he said. "Your husband." The room went silent. Even the beeping of the heart monitor faded under the roar in my ears. What? "You and I were married 2 weeks ago," he said, "in a private civil ceremony in New York, witnessed, signed, sealed." My pulse spiked. That can't be right. I would have remembered that. I don't even know you. He didn't flinch. Apparently, you don't. I struggled to sit up, the IV tugging at my skin. There has to be some mistake. He pulled something from the inside pocket of his jacket and handed it to me. A copy of a marriage certificate. A photo of us. I was wearing a white silk dress. He was in a black tux. My hand in his. My eyes were smiling. My smile didn't reach my real memory. "That's not possible," I whispered. But it was my signature, my face, my name, Ava Sinclair. His, Nathaniel R. Blackwood. He watched me with unreadable eyes. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "I'm here because I promised I would be when you woke up." My fingers gripped the photo. "Why would I marry you?" I asked, my voice cracking. Something flickered in his eyes then. Not softness, never that. But maybe regret. He turned, just enough to face the door. "I'll be back tomorrow. You'll be discharged in 2 days. Your home is ready." My home? He paused at the threshold, voice low but final. "For now, rest. You'll need it." And then he was gone, leaving behind only silence, and a marriage I never signed up for. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. The sun was setting as the town of Lakehurst blurred past the black-tinted windows of the luxury SUV. My fingers curled into the beige leather seat, my nails digging in as I stared out, watching pine trees blur like ghosts. The man beside me, Nathaniel Blackwood, hadn't spoken since we left the hospital. He was focused, scrolling through something on his phone, silent, distant. I could feel the cold off him like air conditioning on full blast. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust this, but I had nowhere else to go. Not when my memories were a black wall, and everyone around me was acting like I belonged to this stranger. I stole a glance at him. His profile was sharp, cruelly beautiful. Every inch of him screamed wealth: bespoke charcoal coat, steel watch, hands that looked like they had never done a day of manual labor. And yet, there was something rigid in him, tension, coiled like a spring, like he hated being near me. Or maybe, like he didn't trust me either. The SUV slowed and pulled through tall iron gates. Beyond them, a long cobblestone drive curved through a forest of oaks and ended in front of a mansion so vast I thought I was hallucinating. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. 4 stories tall, all stone and glass and cold, clean angles. Ivy snaked across the front like it had tried and failed to soften the edges. Light glowed from behind wide windows, but it felt empty, like warmth had been programmed into the walls but never meant to reach the people inside. The driver opened my door. Nate, because husband still didn't sit right in my mouth, stepped out and waited, not offering a hand, not glancing back. I followed, wobbling slightly in my boots. My legs were still weak. The cold November air hit me like a slap. "You live here?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer, just led the way up the stone steps, pulling a key card from his coat pocket. The front doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, and I stepped into another world. The foyer alone was the size of my old apartment. Marble floors, a double staircase curling upward, a chandelier like a frozen waterfall glittered above us. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and money. A housekeeper in a neat black uniform appeared, bowed slightly, and disappeared without a word. Nate spoke for the first time. "You'll stay in the West Wing, 3rd floor. Your clothes are already there." "Because of course they are," I muttered. He looked at me then, sharp and assessing. "If you remember something, anything, tell me immediately." I folded my arms. "You keep acting like I agreed to this, like we planned this together. But I don't remember you. I don't remember a wedding. I don't remember signing anything." He didn't blink. "You did." "Prove it." "I already did." A muscle in his jaw ticked. His voice dropped an octave. "You wanted protection." "From what?" Silence. His eyes, ice blue and unreadable, locked onto mine. "From the people who destroyed your family." I went still. "What do you mean?" But he had already turned. He walked toward the staircase without waiting for me, each step echoing off the high ceilings. At the landing, he paused. "There's a file in your room. Start with that." "And then what?" I asked. He glanced over his shoulder. "Then you decide if you still hate me." And he was gone, leaving me in a mansion that wasn't mine, under a roof I never asked to sleep beneath, with a man who claimed to be my husband, and a truth that was only just beginning to uncoil. The door to the West Wing bedroom closed behind me with a soft click. Silence followed. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that rang too loud, the kind that made you feel like you didn't belong. The room was enormous. Polished floors, thick velvet curtains, a 4-poster bed dressed in crisp white linen. Everything smelled expensive, curated, impersonal. At the center of the bed sat a manila folder. I didn't move for a long moment. I just stared at it. The folder looked so unremarkable, thin, silent, but it might hold the truth about the past 2 weeks, about him, about me, about why I would ever agree to marry a man like Nathaniel Blackwood. I crossed the room slowly, sat on the edge of the mattress, and opened it. And the world I thought I knew began to peel apart. A grainy photo, a warehouse, 2 men shaking hands. One of them, unmistakably, was my father. The other, a man I didn't recognize, but Nate had circled his face in red ink. Below it, a caption written in sharp handwriting: "Marco Rivas, Black Market Arms Financer, 14 federal investigations, 0 convictions." My stomach twisted. My father was an attorney, a quiet man, honorable. He coached Little League and made pancakes every Sunday morning. He wasn't this. I flipped the page. Bank records, dozens of transfers, offshore accounts, all connected to companies that didn't seem to exist. And then I saw it. My last name. Sinclair and Whitmore Holdings. A company my father once ran, now dissolved. But there it was again and again, linked to Rivas, to shell companies, to what looked very much like laundering money for something deeply illegal. I kept turning pages. The last one hit the hardest. A surveillance photo. Me. Walking out of a courthouse, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, jaw tight. Behind me, Nathaniel Blackwood. The caption read, "Marriage license filed, 12 days before accident, 11:42 a.m. Witnessed J. Rollins." My hands trembled. It was real. I had married him, legally, voluntarily. But why? The door opened behind me. I jumped, the folder nearly slipping from my hands. Nate stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You found it?" he said quietly. I stood, holding the papers like they might explain what was happening to my heartbeat. "My father," I choked. "None of this can be true." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "You came to me, Ava. You showed me all of this. You said you needed protection. You said someone was watching you, that after what you found, they'd come for you next." I shook my head. "No, I would have gone to the police." "You tried," he said, cutting me off. "Twice. You said the evidence disappeared before it ever reached their hands. You thought the people involved had someone on the inside." His voice dropped, gentler. "That's when you came to me." I stared at him, the silence between us full of electric static. "You knew my father was involved in all this?" I whispered. "I knew he wasn't the man you thought he was." I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind reeling. He walked to the fireplace, lit a match, and brought it to life. The flames cast flickers of light across his face. "I married you to protect you," he said, "but I also did it to bury the war between our families." My eyes snapped up. "War?" He nodded, gaze locked on the fire. "Your father's company nearly bankrupted mine 10 years ago. He was part of the group that tried to destroy my family's legacy. We were rivals for decades. My father died fighting that." He turned to me. "And I swore I'd finish it." I stood. "So what is this then? A treaty? A pawn move on your chessboard?" Something dark flickered across his face. "It was supposed to be." I swallowed hard, throat dry. "But—" His eyes met mine, and this time, they weren't so unreadable. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, the fire crackled, and I realized I had just stepped into something far more dangerous than a marriage. This was a battleground, and I was both the weapon and the prize. I didn't sleep that night. Even as the fire died to embers and shadows stretched across the walls, I sat in the armchair by the window, watching the rain beat against the glass. The folder lay open on the side table. The truth sat in it like a quiet, patient bomb. My father wasn't who I thought he was, and I wasn't sure I knew who I was either. When the morning light bled in through the curtains, I finally stood and walked to the door. My legs were stiff, my mind sharper. I needed answers. I found Nathaniel in the sunroom. He was already dressed, seated in a leather armchair by a wall of windows, sipping black coffee and reading a digital report on a tablet. The man was as immaculate at 7 a.m. as he was the night before. He didn't look up. "Did you sleep?" "No." He gestured to the other chair. I sat, hands clenched in my lap. "I want to see it," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "See what?" "The contract." A long pause. Then he placed the tablet down, stood, and left the room. When he returned, he carried a thin leather folder. He handed it to me without a word. I opened it slowly. Marriage agreement. Signed and notarized. 12 pages. Every clause coldly precise. My signature stared back at me from the bottom of page 1. Neat, confident, familiar. I skimmed through the paragraphs, reading faster as unease clawed up my spine. Clause 7.2. The wife, Ava Sinclair, agrees to maintain residency in the Blackwood estate for no less than 12 months. Clause 7.6. The wife shall not engage in romantic or intimate relationships outside of the marriage within the agreed-upon duration. Clause 7.9. Any attempt to dissolve the union before the agreed period shall trigger a penalty clause. All assets provided by the husband shall be returned in full, and a breach fee of $2 million shall be owed to Blackwood Holdings. Clause 8.3. The marriage is to be kept confidential from media or outside entities, unless mutually agreed upon by both parties. Clause 9.1. In the event of memory loss, contract terms remain binding unless annulled in court. I looked up. You expected me to lose my memory? He tilted his head. No, but I expected you might run. My hands shook slightly as I closed the folder. You locked me into this. You came to me, he said calmly. You asked me to do whatever it took to keep you safe. You said you needed time, cover, a way to disappear while the truth unraveled. I pressed my palms to my eyes. I was desperate. I must have been out of my mind. His voice was low. You were terrified, and you trusted me. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. Well, clearly I was wrong. He moved closer, but stopped short of touching me. I'm not your enemy, Ava. I looked up at him. Aren't you? He didn't respond, just looked at me the way he always did, like I was a problem to be solved. I held the folder out to him. I want out. You can't, he said, voice hardening. Not unless you pay the breach fee, and not unless I agree. You mean you'd keep me here against my will? He stepped back. I mean I'm honoring our agreement. I don't break contracts. My heart beat faster. You really think this is going to work? That I'll just play house here while the world burns outside? I think, he said quietly, you don't remember why you were so willing to say yes, but I do. We stared at each other. And in that moment, I understood something. This wasn't just about protection. This wasn't just about exposure, or family, or old sins. This was about power. And Nathaniel Blackwood never gave it up once he had it, even if that meant keeping me in a cage of gold. It wasn't until the next afternoon that I met the man who would shift everything. His name was Damien Hart, 30-something, impeccably tailored. The kind of man who wore Italian leather like it was skin and used silence as a weapon. He arrived in a matte black car that made no noise when it pulled into the courtyard. I watched him from the window of the study as he stepped out and adjusted the cuffs of his dove gray suit. Nate met him at the door. There were no greetings, just a nod and a low exchange of words. I knew immediately who he was. No one dressed like that unless they handled secrets for a living. I found Nate in the library, flanked by high shelves and warm leather. He didn't look surprised to see me. Your lawyer's here, I said, trying to keep my tone even. He's our lawyer, he corrected. He works for you. And you're my wife. Legally, he works for us. I crossed my arms. I want to speak to him, alone. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. Don't ask him to break privilege. He won't. Minutes later, I sat across from Damien Hart in the glass sunroom. A tray of untouched tea sat between us. I didn't care for tea. I cared about the truth. He placed a thick leather briefcase on the table, unclasped it, and pulled out a copy of the marriage agreement. You've read it? He asked, voice crisp. Cover to cover. Then you understand the terms are legally sound, ironclad. "I understand that," I said slowly. "What I don't understand is what's missing." His fingers paused, just for a second. "There's nothing missing, Mrs. Sinclair." "It's Mrs. Blackwood, remember?" I said coldly. "At least on paper." He gave a slight smile. "Of course." I leaned forward. "There's something he's not telling me, and if you're as smart as you look, you already know what I'm talking about." Silence stretched. Finally, Damien closed the folder and sat back. "There was an addendum," he said. My heart thudded once, hard. "What kind of addendum?" "One you requested and signed." He pulled out a separate sheet of paper, slim, tightly typed. I read the heading. Addendum 3B, Conditional Trust Protection Clause. Beneficiary, Ava Sinclair Blackwood. I skimmed down to the highlighted section. In the event of irreparable harm or death to the undersigned, or if the undersigned loses mental capacity, all protective assets, documents, and materials are to be transferred into the care of Nathaniel Blackwood for the purpose of continued legal shielding of the Sinclair family records and the protection of classified documentation, including, but not limited to— My hands began to tremble. I looked up. Why would I sign this? Damien didn't blink. "Because you discovered something, Mrs. Blackwood. Something that endangered not only you, but several people whose names are sealed under federal protection. You knew you couldn't carry it alone, so you gave it to him." "I gave him everything?" "In return, he gave you the only thing powerful enough to keep it hidden, his name." I sat back, stunned. It wasn't just a marriage. It wasn't just a deal. It was a vault. He was the vault. "Is it true?" I asked. "He can't annul this unless I agree?" Damien nodded. "Unless you breach the terms. But doing so would release everything, including the files tied to your father's past." I exhaled slowly. So that was it. I wasn't just his wife. I was a liability. He had turned into leverage. When I left the room, I didn't go to the West Wing. I went to the top floor where Nate's office was. He was on a call. He ended it as soon as he saw my face. I didn't sit. I didn't ask permission. "You turned me into a weapon," I said. He didn't deny it. "You made me your wife so you could protect what I found," I continued. "But you also knew that if I remembered, if I ever remembered, I might not forgive you." He stood. "You trusted me," he said. "You still do." My voice cracked. "I don't know what I trust anymore." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the shadow of a long night under his eyes. "I never planned to fall for you, Ava." I froze. But I did. And just like that, every truth I thought I understood blurred again. Because this man, cold, calculated, cruel in his precision, had just confessed something I wasn't ready to hear. Love. Or the beginning of it. Or, maybe, the ruin. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The word had landed like a grenade between us. Love. It echoed in the silence of his office, bouncing off the wood-paneled walls and the sharp corners of his steel mind. I stared at him, searching for a smirk, for a tell, something that would prove he didn't mean it. But Nathaniel Blackwood didn't play with words he couldn't control. And this one he had let slip like it burned. "Don't say that," I whispered. His eyes didn't flinch. "Why not?" "Because you're the reason I'm trapped here. Because you're the reason I wake up every day in a stranger's house wearing a name I never chose." He took a step closer. "And yet you don't run." "Because I can't." "Exactly." His voice was low, dangerous, not in anger, but in intensity. "I can't run either, Ava. Not from this. Not from you." My heart thudded. I hated how it reacted to him, how it recognized something before my brain could process it. I turned to leave. He caught my wrist. Not hard, not controlling, just contact. The kind that made the air thin. I looked up at him. "I should hate you," I said, my voice trembling. "You do. I should want to destroy you. You will. And yet I didn't pull away." He leaned in slowly, as if giving me every chance to say no, as if daring me to flinch. I didn't. His lips brushed mine. Not a kiss, not yet. Just a breath between two people who had no business wanting anything from each other. But in that moment, the world tilted. Because it wasn't about logic, or betrayal, or the contract between us. It was about fire. The kind you try to smother and only end up feeding. His hand slid to my jaw, thumb brushing my cheek like I was something fragile. Our lips met. Soft at first, careful. Then it deepened. A clash of restraint and hunger, of memory lost and instinct remembered. It was a kiss that wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. When we broke apart, I stood there breathless. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to, because the damage was already done. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Not because of fear, but because something inside me had shifted. This man, my enemy, my protector, my husband, he had just touched a part of me I didn't know was still alive, and I wasn't sure which was more dangerous, what he'd done to me or what I was starting to feel in return. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no message, no trace of the man who had kissed me like I was the only war he ever wanted to lose. I woke to find the bed beside me untouched, the fireplace cold, the silence deeper than usual. Part of me told myself it was better this way. The other part, the one I didn't want to admit existed, ached. I dressed slowly, in clothes that weren't mine but fit like they belonged, tailored, neutral, soft against my skin. Every thread whispered of his presence, his power, his obsession with control. But the kiss, that hadn't felt controlled. That had felt dangerous. I wandered the halls, hoping not to run into him, and also hoping I would. But the house was quiet, too quiet, until I reached the atrium. That's where I saw her. A woman, tall, polished, elegant, raven black hair in a tight bun, red lipstick, and a tailored white coat over heels that echoed confidently with every step. She was standing by the grand piano, leafing through a folder, until she saw me. Our eyes met, and she smiled, sharp and slow. "You must be Ava," she said, her voice like silk wrapped around steel. "Yes," I answered carefully. "And you are?" "I'm Dr. Celeste Monroe, corporate psychologist, and Nathaniel's longtime associate." The way she said associate told me everything and nothing. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. I took it. It was cold. "He didn't mention I'd be meeting someone," I said. She arched an eyebrow. "He didn't mention I'd be meeting you." I stepped back slightly. "Why are you here?" "Routine evaluation," she said casually. "High-level executives undergo them periodically. Emotional hygiene, psychological performance, risk assessment." Her eyes lingered on me. "Marriage compatibility?" I stiffened. "Excuse me." She smiled wider. "Nathaniel requested a review. Said the circumstances were accelerated. You know, sudden marriages tend to destabilize behavioral baselines." I crossed my arms. "And you always make surprise visits to evaluate your exes?" She didn't flinch. "I'm a professional, Ava, and Nathaniel is still a client." Her tone made it clear that he had once been more. I wanted to leave, to walk away from her perfume, her polished indifference, her perfect knowledge of the man I barely understood. But instead, I asked, "How long were you with him?" She laughed softly. "Years, off and on, mostly off. Nathaniel isn't easy to love." I met her gaze. "I wouldn't know. It's not love. It's a contract." "Is it?" she asked, stepping closer. We stood inches apart. "I knew every version of him," she said. "The cold one, the calculating one, even the one who almost let himself believe in something real." She looked me over like she was reading a puzzle. "But you're the first woman he married." I didn't respond, because I didn't have an answer for that either. Later that day, I found Nathaniel in his study. He looked up as I walked in, eyes tired. "She's here," I said simply. "I know. You didn't tell me. I didn't think it mattered." "It does," I said. He set his pen down. "She's not a threat to you." "I'm not worried about her being a threat," I said slowly. "I'm worried about what she knows, about you." He stood, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of me. "Celeste is from my past," he said. "But you're the only one I've let into my future." Something in his voice cracked on that last word. I looked up at him, something breaking quietly inside me. "What happened the other night?" I began. "I shouldn't have kissed you," he said quickly. "Not yet." I blinked. "What do you mean, not yet?" He exhaled, a slow breath that shook at the edges. "I need you to remember, to choose me when you know everything." And then he walked past me, leaving me alone with a past I couldn't access and a present I didn't understand. But for the first time, I wanted to. The mansion had over 47 doors. I counted them on the third day of silence, after Celeste left, after Nate retreated behind cold eyes again, too careful now, like the kiss between us had reopened something deeper than he intended. He said he wanted me to choose him when I remembered everything. But how could I choose a man who still kept part of himself barricaded behind secrets and stone? So I wandered, room to room, until I found the one he didn't want me to open. It was on the 4th floor, a narrow hallway, no windows, dustier than the others, less curated, almost forgotten. And at the end of it, a white oak door with an antique brass knob and a digital keypad. Locked. The only door in the house that didn't open. And just like that, I knew. This door held the thing he didn't want me to see. That night, I searched his study when I knew he was in the gym. It wasn't hard to guess the code. Everything with Nate was numbers, systems, patterns. I remembered the marriage license, filed at 11:42 a.m., dated 12 days before the accident. 1142. I whispered the numbers into the keypad the next morning. The lock clicked. I froze. Even the air beyond the door felt different, cooler, stiller, like it hadn't been disturbed in a long time. I pushed it open and stepped into the past. It was a bedroom, but not like the ones in the rest of the house. This one was personal, lived in. Dust covered the dresser, but the sheets were clean, tucked with quiet precision. On the wall, above the headboard, a large painting. A woman. Not me, not Celeste. She had Nate's eyes. Next to the bed, a nightstand. On it, a broken watch, a bottle of perfume, a photo in a silver frame. I picked it up. It was Nate, maybe 20. His arm wrapped around a girl with strawberry blonde hair, soft freckles, and eyes full of mischief. She looked like me. Too much like me. I turned the frame over, faint writing on the back. E and N, summer 2013. E? My stomach turned. I opened the nightstand drawer. A journal. The name embossed on the front in faded gold leaf. Eliza Rowan Blackwood. I stared at the name. Rowan. My mother's maiden name was Rowan. No, that wasn't possible. I opened the journal. The first page read, "They'll never let us be together, Nate, but maybe if we make them believe we hate each other, they'll stop watching. Maybe then we'll be safe." I dropped the book. My breath came in sharp waves. It wasn't just a bedroom. It was a memory, and somehow I was a part of it. I stumbled out into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't know where to go, what to believe. But I knew one thing. Nathaniel Blackwood didn't just marry me out of protection. He married me because of something deeper, something tied to the girl with my mother's last name, to the locked room, to the journal that should never have survived, and to a truth that had just begun to bleed through the cracks in this perfect prison of a marriage. I didn't hear him come in. I was still in the hallway outside the locked room, chest heaving, heart in my throat, the journal clutched to my side like a stolen relic. But I felt him, the shift in the air, the temperature drop. "Ava." His voice wasn't angry. It was quiet, heavy. I turned. He was standing in the shadows at the end of the corridor, his face unreadable, still, like he already knew what I'd found, like he'd always known I'd find it. "You shouldn't be in there," he said. I held up the journal. "Then why didn't you change the code?" Silence. I took a step forward. "Who is she?" He looked down for a moment, and when he looked back up, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Grief. Her name was Eliza Rowan Blackwood. I waited. "Your sister?" He nodded once. "She died in 2013, car accident, hit and run, no arrests." I swallowed, throat dry. "And the man in the photo with her?" He didn't answer, because we both already knew. "My father," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Your father and my sister were in love, secretly, for years. They tried to hide it from both families." I gripped the journal tighter. "But someone found out." Nate's jaw clenched. "Both families were at war, not over business, not really, over blood. My father hated yours, said the Sinclairs would never mix with ours, not after what happened in 1986. What happened?" He stared at me like it would cost him something to say it. "Your uncle ruined my aunt, left her, humiliated her, drove her into the ground." I blanked. I never knew I had an uncle. "Because they erased him," Nate said, "just like they tried to erase Eliza." The hall suddenly felt colder, narrower, like the ghosts of both families were pressing in around us. "Why didn't you tell me this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because it was never supposed to matter." I took a step toward him. "Then why keep her room perfectly intact?" He didn't look away. "Because I couldn't bury her memory, and because deep down I knew you'd come looking for her, for the truth, and when you did," his voice dropped, "I knew I'd lose you again." My breath hitched. "Again?" He walked toward me now, each step careful, like I might shatter. "You met me when we were kids," he said quietly, "in upstate Vermont, a summer retreat. Our parents didn't know. You were 9, I was 10. You told me your name was Ava Rowan." I froze. "I never forgot you," he said, "even after Eliza died, even after everything went dark." My knees weakened. "I buried your name," he said. "I buried the memory. Until the day you walked into my office with a flash drive and a list of enemies, and I saw those eyes again." He stepped close. "And I knew," he said. My voice cracked. "Knew what?" "That I was about to marry the daughter of the man who got my sister killed." The silence that followed wasn't silent at all. It was screaming. Because in that moment, I understood everything.
Why he married me. Why he protected me. Why he hated himself for feeling something he swore he never would. This wasn't just a war between names. It was a blood debt. And somehow, I was both the weapon and the wound. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't say goodbye. At dawn, I slipped out of the mansion through the East Conservatory, the cold air burning my throat as I walked barefoot across the frost-laced gravel toward the back gate. The code hadn't changed. The same 4 digits. 1142. Even after everything I had uncovered, he hadn't tried to stop me. Maybe that was his way of saying I was free. Or maybe he knew I'd never really be. The town outside the Blackwood estate felt like another world, too small, too normal. The coffee shop on Main Street, the silent train station, a bookstore that smelled like cinnamon and thyme. I wandered for hours, the weight of the journal still tucked beneath my coat, Eliza's words whispering in my head. They'll never let us be together. But maybe if we make them believe we hate each other. Had that been the plan? For them? For us? I didn't know where I was going until I found myself standing in front of a hospice. An old white building with ivy-covered windows. I don't know what led me there, some thread I hadn't meant to follow. Inside, the air was warm, sterile, kind. I asked the nurse if anyone named Whitmore was checked in. She blinked. "Are you family?" I don't know. She glanced at the sign-in sheet. Room 12B. I climbed the stairs slowly. My pulse thrummed like war drums in my chest. At the door, I paused, and then I pushed it open. There, seated by the window in a wheelchair, was a man. Thin, gray-haired, eyes dull but sharp enough to notice me immediately. He turned, and I saw it. My face, in older form, weathered, familiar. He blinked. "Ava?" I took a step inside, my throat closing. "Do I know you?" He smiled faintly. "You did, once." I froze. "Who are you?" He coughed. His voice was brittle. "My name is Jonathan Rowan, Eliza's fiancé." My knees nearly buckled. "No," I whispered, "that can't be. She died in 2013. "She did," he said. "Because of me." I sat slowly, everything tilting sideways. "I was working with your father," he continued, "in secret, trying to take down the people who wanted Eliza dead. She got caught in the middle. The car wasn't an accident." I couldn't breathe. "She was pregnant," he whispered. My world stopped. "What?" He nodded, tears in his tired eyes. "And they didn't want the bloodlines mixing, the Sinclairs and the Blackwoods. You weren't supposed to survive." A silence fell between us, so complete it felt holy. "I disappeared after the crash," he said, "faked my death, too dangerous to stay. But when I heard your name last week, when I saw your picture in the paper—" My picture? He reached for a newspaper clipping. There it was, a grainy photo of me at the courthouse. Ava Sinclair Blackwood appears in public amid rumored family merger. He looked at me. "I knew you had to be her, my daughter's daughter." I couldn't stop shaking. Everything I thought I knew. Nathaniel, my father, the contract, even me. It was all lies stitched over truth. And now, sitting across from a ghost who wasn't dead, I realized I had only begun to scratch the surface. Because if Jonathan Rowan was alive, then someone powerful had tried to bury the truth deep enough to be forgotten forever. And they were still watching, still waiting. The gates of the Blackwood estate groaned open at midnight. I stepped through them slowly, my boots leaving damp footprints on the marble path, the cold wind tangling my hair around my face. I didn't rush. This time, I wanted them to see me coming. 2 guards blinked in surprise as I passed. I didn't speak to them. The doors to the mansion opened before I even touched them. He was waiting.
Nathaniel stood in the foyer, hands at his sides, dressed in black, no tie, no armor, just him. The man I had married, the man who had locked up the truth. We stared at each other, the air pulsing between us. "I didn't think you'd come back," he said finally. I took another step forward. "Neither did I," replied. But then I met someone who reminded me why I had to. His jaw tensed. Who? I pulled the folded photograph from my coat pocket and held it up. It was old, grainy. Two young lovers smiling at the edge of a dock, Ava Blackwood and Jonathan Rowan. Nate paled. Impossible, he breathed. He's dead. No, I said. He's been alive all this time, in hiding, watching, and he knows everything. The silence cracked like thunder. I walked past him and entered the grand study, threw the photo onto the desk. I know what my father did, what yours did. I know the war was never about companies. It was about blood. He followed, slower. You were never supposed to find that room. You mean the room where your dead sister kept a journal of her forbidden love? Or the one where your family wrote my name out of history? I turned to him, fire building in my voice. You thought you could protect me by lying to me. But I don't need protection anymore, Nate. I need the truth. All of it. Now. He looked at me then, not with coldness, with sorrow, and something like respect. You remember who you are, he said. No, I whispered. I discovered who I am. And now, you have a choice. I stepped closer. You can keep pretending I'm the girl you tricked into a marriage contract, or you can look me in the eye and admit what this really is. He clenched his jaw. And what's that? I took a breath that tasted like revolution. A reckoning. A reckoning. He exhaled, slowly, and then reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small velvet-covered box and placed it on the table between us. I stared. Open it, he said. Inside was a USB drive, and beneath it a document. Full Blackwood Sinclair settlement agreement, unredacted, unsigned. This has every file your father buried, Nate said quietly. Evidence, paper trails, witness names, offshore accounts, even what happened the night Eliza died. I looked up at him. Why now? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the fire, lit it with a single match, and stared into the flames. Because I realized something while you were gone, he said. I've spent years trying to protect ghosts, family legacies, old grudges. But none of that matters if I lose you. My breath caught. You still think we can come back from this? He turned to me. I think the only way forward is to stop hiding behind lies. You deserve the truth. You always did. I looked down at the box and made my choice. I'll read every word, I said. But when I'm done, we're going to have a very different conversation. About what? I met his eyes. About what comes after revenge. It took me 4 hours to open the files. The drive was encrypted with 2 levels of password protection, both of which Nathaniel had written down for me in his own hand. That alone told me this wasn't a game anymore. He was done hiding. I sat alone in the study, every curtain drawn, the fire low, silence thick, as I clicked through folders that hadn't seen daylight in over a decade. Project ER. Sinclair Blackwood Dispute, 1986-2013. Asset shielding. Confidential witness statements. Rowan folder. Classified. Open only if necessary. I opened them all. And what I saw hollowed me. The first files were legal documents. Bribes. Shell companies. Silent partners. My father had laundered money through Blackwood contracts, using Eliza as leverage. He knew Nate loved her, and he used that to gain control over land and patents that should never have belonged to Sinclair Holdings. But it was more than greed. It was strategy. The next folder was worse.
Phone calls. Eliza pleading with someone, not Nate, not Jonathan. A woman. Celeste, please, if you tell them where I'm hiding, they'll kill me. Please, you promised. And then static. Cut off. I stared at the screen. Celeste? The psychologist? No, it couldn't be. I dug deeper.
Email exchanges between her and Blackwood senior executives, payments, appointments logged the day before Eliza's crash, a call placed from her clinic to Eliza's burner phone, the last call she ever received. It wasn't an accident. It was an execution, and Celeste Monroe had helped orchestrate it. I sat back, the blood in my veins turning to ice. She knew. She knew Eliza was pregnant. She knew the families would implode if the truth ever came out. She knew about me. That's why she had come to the estate, not to assess us, to monitor us, to see if Nathaniel had told me anything, to see if I remembered. And if I had, she would have acted, quietly, efficiently, just like before. The door opened behind me. I turned, startled. Nathaniel stepped inside. His eyes landed on the open screen. "You found it," he said quietly. "She knew," I whispered. "Celeste, she was part of it." His jaw tightened. "I always suspected, but I could never prove it." I pointed to the files. "Well, now we can." He came closer, studied my face. "You're shaking." "I'm not afraid." "No," he said, gently brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "You're furious." I laughed bitterly. She came into this house, sat across from me, looked me in the eye, and lied. "She does that well," he murmured. "It's how she survived in a world full of men with knives and secrets." I closed the laptop and stood. "We expose her," I said, "publicly, legally, no more hiding." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "But she won't go down quietly," he warned. "She still has allies, money, leverage." "So do we," I said, "and for the first time, we're using it together." Something shifted in his eyes, pride, respect, and something else, deeper, something dangerous. Because for the first time, we weren't enemies, we were allies. And the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The chandelier above the ballroom glittered like 1,000 tiny lies. Below it, the rich and ruthless danced, laughed, toasted to causes they didn't believe in, wearing designer gilt stitched over centuries of blood money. I stepped into the crowd like a knife into silk. Nathaniel walked beside me, black tux pressed to perfection, hand on the small of my back. We looked like every other power couple in the room. Too rich, too beautiful, too dangerous to touch. But tonight wasn't about appearance. It was about exposure. Celeste Monroe stood near the center of the ballroom, laughing with a circle of men in navy suits and hollow smiles. Her hair was pulled back into a tight twist, pearls around her neck, cold calculation in her eyes. She hadn't seen me yet, but she would. They announced us as Mr. and Mrs. Nathaniel Blackwood. Heads turned. Celeste's did last. The moment she saw me, her smile faltered. Just enough for me to see the flicker of recognition, of fear. I walked toward her. People parted around me like the sea around a storm. "Dr. Monroe," I said sweetly. She recovered fast. "Ava, you look radiant." "And you look nervous." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I leaned in slightly, just enough for the words to hit only her ears. "Your voice is on the last call Eliza ever answered. Would you like me to play it now, or wait until dessert?" Her smile froze. "You're bluffing." I tilted my head. "Am I?" From across the room, Nathaniel gave a subtle nod. At that signal, Damien, the lawyer, slipped a flash drive to a waiting reporter from the Herald. Exactly as planned. Celeste's understood. The game was already over. "You'll go down with me," she said softly. I smiled. "I was born at the bottom. You'll have much farther to fall." 10 minutes later, Celeste was escorted from the building under the polite guise of a private call. She never made it back in. By morning, her clinic's records were subpoenaed, her offshore accounts frozen. Her name, once sacred in elite psychological circles, was red ink. But that wasn't the part that mattered. It was the moment just before she left when she turned to look at Nathaniel and didn't find rage. She found mercy, and it terrified her more than vengeance ever could. Later that night, we returned to the estate in silence, but it wasn't the heavy, cold kind anymore. It was warm, earned, real. He poured 2 glasses of wine in the library, sat beside me on the couch. "Do you still think I'm your enemy?" he asked. I looked at him for a long time. "No," I said, "but you were." He didn't deny it. Instead, he raised his glass. "To the truth." I clinked mine gently against his. "To what comes after." It came in a white envelope. No return address, no stamp, just my name on the front, handwritten in ink that looked like it had bled straight from memory. Ava. Nathaniel was in the garden when I found it, walking the hound through late autumn leaves. I sat on the edge of the grand staircase, stared at the seal. Something about it made my hands shake. I hadn't seen or heard from my mother in 5 years. She had vanished after my father's funeral, left without goodbye, without explanation, as if her grief had swallowed her whole. Until now. The letter was short, but it broke something in me I didn't know was still whole. My dearest Ava, if you're reading this, then you've uncovered more than I ever wanted you to know, and I am sorry. I loved your father, and I hated him. Both are true. He married me for power, for connection, but somewhere along the way, I gave him my soul. What he did to Eliza Blackwood was unforgivable. What he did to you? Unthinkable. But there's one more truth you don't know yet, one I could never live with saying aloud. You weren't born to be a pawn, Ava. You were born to be the queen that ends this game. Eliza wasn't your cousin. She was your mother. And the man you think is your father wasn't. His name was Jonathan Rowan, and he loved Eliza until the day she died, just like she loved you. You are the last of both bloodlines, and the only one who can rewrite what they tried to destroy. Choose carefully what kind of legacy you want to carry forward. You're not bound by theirs anymore. I love you. M. I dropped the letter. The room spun. I couldn't breathe. Everything in my life, my name, my childhood, my grief, wasn't just tainted. It was rewritten. I had spent my whole life thinking I was born from betrayal, from business, from strategy. But I was born from love, a forbidden one, and they'd buried it. Covered it in legal names and contracts and lies until it didn't resemble love at all. That night, I told Nathaniel everything. We sat in the same room where we first kissed, where we first tried to hate each other enough to forget how it felt. "I don't know who I am anymore," I whispered. He didn't hesitate. "You're Ava," he said. "You're the woman who made me stop surviving and start feeling again. You're the only one who ever made me want to lose control. I don't even know if I'm a Blackwood or a Sinclair." "Maybe you're both," he said. "Maybe you're neither." I met his eyes. "Or maybe I'm something new." The wind off the cliffs was cold, but my heart felt warm. I stood on the balcony of the estate, looking out over the sea. The same one Eliza must have watched once, young, in love, scared, never knowing her daughter would one day return here to finish the story she couldn't. Behind me, the mansion was silent. For the first time since I stepped into Nathaniel Blackwood's world, there were no more secrets, no locked doors, no contracts, just choice. And it was mine. Earlier that day, I had torn the marriage agreement in half. The paper made no sound. It disintegrated like it had never meant anything. He hadn't tried to stop me. He'd only watched. "I married you for the wrong reasons," he had said, voice raw. "But somewhere in all of it, I fell, and I never stopped falling." "So did I'd whispered, "even when I hated you." And then I'd added, "That marriage, the one we never signed or never meant to, it's over.
His shoulders had stiffened, until I added, "Now let's talk about the one we choose." I turned as the door behind me opened. Nathaniel stepped onto the balcony, wind tugging at his shirt sleeves. His eyes met mine, those storm-colored eyes that had once scared me. Now I saw the boy beneath the armor, the man who never stopped grieving, the partner who had fought beside me, not against me, when it counted most. He walked to me, wordless, and pulled a small black box from his pocket. Not velvet, not dramatic, just simple, real. I opened it. Inside, a ring. Not new, not polished, worn around the edges. Gold. "My mother's," he said softly. "Eliza gave it to her. She wanted it passed on, someday, to someone who understood what it meant to stay, even when it hurts." I looked up at him, eyes burning. "I'm not asking for forever," he said. "I'm asking for real, with no lies between us, no power plays, no ghosts." I nodded, heart trembling. "No more contracts," I whispered. "Only promises," he said. I took the ring, and I slipped it on my finger. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because in a world that tried to write us as enemies, we had rewritten the ending. Epilogue, 1 year later. Ava Sinclair Blackwood. No press called me that anymore. They called me CEO, founder, reformer. But at home, he still called me love, and I still answered to it. We kept the estate, but opened the gates. Eliza's room became a sanctuary, a space for lost girls to find their voice again. We started a fund in her name. Every year, we lit a candle for the ones who never got to rewrite their endings. And every year, we looked at each other like we still couldn't believe we had made it out alive. Not perfect, but real. And that always had been, always would be.